The locked sub-basement of the institute smelled like cold dust and varnish, the kind of air that made whispers feel louder. Alex's keycard shouldn't have worked on the corroded steel door, but it did, and the bolt released with a theatrical clack that set his historian's nerves dancing. Inside, a room preserved like a time capsule, wall calendars frozen on 1968, a corkboard of yellowing memos with redacted lines like scars, and in the center, a ribbed ring of metal girdled with ceramic modules and braided silver cables. "Tell me you didn't break in," Liza said, shouldering her camera bag, her voice half laugh, half warning. "I didn't," he said, though the room felt like a crime. A brass plate on the ring's base read, "Prototype, temporal displacement array." Beneath it, a hand-etched name, Project Janus. Project Janus had been a Cold War secret, born in the feverish labs of the late 1950s when the U.S. government chased every edge against the Soviets. Whispers in declassified files Alex had pored over during his doctoral research, hinted at experiments with quantum entanglement and chronometric fields, funded under black budgets and abandoned after unexplained accidents. One engineer, Dr. Elias Grant, had vanished in 1968, his notes ending mid-sentence, "The door opens both ways." Alex had always dismissed it as pseudoscience, but here it was, real and humming faintly under his touch. He circled the device, fingers tracing the machine's heat-scarred welds, the handwritten notations in a neat engineer's script: phase offset, anchor lock, return aperture. His training made him attentive to artifacts, to provenance, but the itch between his shoulder blades was curiosity, not caution. Liza prowled the perimeter, filming the room with the small camera she never went anywhere without. "This isn't a mock-up," she murmured, pivoting to catch his face. "Real hardware, real budget, and a real purpose they never stamped into a press release." Alex found a metal case tucked beneath the array, a transit module the size of a suitcase with a thick glass window onto a humming inner lattice, and a second plate. "Do not activate without field anchor." He felt the weight of history the way sailors feel whether pressure building, something about to break. "Don't even say it," Liza said, because she saw the shape of his thoughts first. He said it anyway. A test. A short hop. 10 minutes, close range, just enough to see if it works. She snorted. "You're a historian. We collect evidence. We don't become it." But her eyes were bright. Caution made a thin mask for hunger. She'd spent years reporting answers filtered through other people's filters. This was unscripted. He set the suitcase on the concrete and opened it. Inside lay a nest of coiled cables, a control wand with a cracked Bakelite grip, and a folded manual, brittle as leaves. Warning, it began, in officious black caps. Chronometric displacement will alter reference frame. Use anchor. Do not interact. "We'll anchor here," he said softly. "Tag our time and place. We can come right back." They worked in silence, two criminals in altar robes. Liza rigged the camera to the girders and set it to record. Alex clipped the anchor puck to the concrete and synced it to the transit module, the old technology thunking through its own routines. The ring stirred with a hesitant hum that deepened into a throaty, oceanic throb. Pale blue filaments licked between the ceramic teeth like St. Elmo's fire. "If we end up in a broom closet in 1890, I'm not interviewing a single broom," Liza said, stepping into the ring with him, their shoulders almost touching. He thumbed the control wand. The air thickened, as if the room had been submerged. The light turned syrupy. Liza's hand found his wrist and squeezed. Then the floor tilted, and the world unzipped. They landed like a bad edit spliced into a different film. Heat, sound, color all too saturated. The air slammed into their lungs. Humid, vegetative, alive with the sweetness of rotting fruit and diesel fumes. A dragonfly burned past Alex's cheek like a thrown jewel. A motorbike coughed by, its rider bareheaded, eyes squinted against the sun. They were not in a basement. They were in a dusty alley with ochre walls and a tangle of power lines like a spider's drunk weaving overhead. From beyond the alley came a boom of loudspeakers and a distant, persistent chop, helicopter blades carving the sky. Liza's camera, slung crossbody, clicked against his hip. "Where?" she started. And then her gaze climbed, caught on the flag snapping above a low stucco building, yellow with 3 red stripes. They stumbled into a market that radiated from a broad street like spokes. Piles of limes, pyramids of chilies, fish glistening on beds of crushed ice that hissed as it melted. Women in conical non-law hats bargained with a rhythm that made language unnecessary. Children darted between stalls like sparrows. Loudspeakers crackled with an announcer's clipped cadence. 2 soldiers in olive fatigues. RVN. Alex's mind supplied from the bottomless drawer of his studies. Smoked by a stack of crates stamped with English stencils. An American Jeep rattled past, the driver waving at someone he thought he knew. Alex's pulse pounded. The newsstand at the corner was a small altar to proof. The Saigon Daily News, masthead clear as a bell. He bought a copy with coins he didn't remember having, hands shaking enough to crease the date as he lifted it. March 1965. Beginning of escalation, Liza breathed, reading upside down. It's real. Her voice had the unsteady reverence of a believer's first prayer. Alex felt a fierce, vertiginous joy and a terror that hollowed it out. The transit module thumped against his leg. Disguised beneath the canvas wrap, he'd slung on it back in the lab. "We should hide," he said, "before someone decides we're interesting." They drifted toward a shaded courtyard behind a Buddhist pagoda, where incense made the air taste like cinnamon and resin. A monk swept slowly, each stroke a metronome that ignored their panic. Liza pressed her palm to a carved stone guardian lion and laughed once, shakily. "I can't put this in the paper," she said. "No one would believe it. Not without wrecking everything." They took stock like reporters at the scene of their own accident. The anchor in the lab pulsed in the transit module's tiny window, a patient heartbeat. The manual's cloth ribbon marked a set of instructions for a return jump. "Charge is finite," Alex said, translating the old engineering notes aloud. "And the anchors are way home. We're tethered to our time, but the line isn't infinite." He remembered his graduate advisor's words about the past. "It is not clay. It is sediment. Disturb 1 grain and you get a slide." Liza watched him with a quiet he rarely saw from her. "You're thinking about what this means," she said. "I'm thinking about what this could do. To people. To stories that ended badly." The helicopter sound swelled. A patrol passed on the street beyond the wall. Americans in jungle fatigues with soft caps and a sunburnt sergeant. Their laughter loud because it had to be. Alex's gaze snagged on the patch stitched onto a sleeve. Military Assistance Command, Vietnam. Advisors, not yet full battalions. Before the Marines at Da Nang. Before the long grind turned total. His historian's mind threw out timelines like cards. He could almost see the paths spooling, choices furcating. Liza leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, sweat darkening the neckline of her t-shirt. "We can go back right now," she said, reading his fear. "Call it a miracle. Lock the door. Pretend we never saw the inside of a different year." He shook his head, and that surprised them both. "We came to find out if it works," he said. "It works, but we're not just tourists. We're witnesses." He felt the hubris in the word as he said it, and winced. On the street, a transistor radio blared a song Alex recognized from his father's record player, scrubbed of nostalgia by distance and dust. Liza's mouth softened. 10 minutes, she said. Then we jump back. We write everything down. We decide what to do when the adrenaline is gone. It sounded practical enough to be a promise. 10 minutes became 20 in the way the presence of history bends time. A parade of moments strung like beads. A woman sold them bottled water and laughed at Alex's pronunciation. A boy pointed at Liza's camera and mimed using it with shameless delight. A group of men in ill-fitting suits argued under a banyan tree, their faces weathered by opinions. Somewhere a crack and then another distant, not yet here. The smell of smoke began to creep under the brighter notes of basil and fried dough. Liza filmed discreetly, journalist muscle memory turned to reverence. Alex sketched the street's layout in a small notebook because that's what he did when he was scared. Made maps. By the time they threaded back to the alley, the sky had shifted from brass to coin, the light going thin. The module in Alex's arms vibrated with the anchor's call, a parent's voice over a playground. "Ready?" Liza asked, and he nodded, though the motion felt like a lie. They stepped into a doorway that would look ordinary on any map, and he thumbed the control wand. The alley stretched, colors bled. The sweep of the monk's broom became a comet tail. For an instant he felt both moments, incense and varnish, overlay like vellum sheets. Then the basement slammed back into place, blue filaments dying like fireflies, the ring's hum falling into its metal bones. Silence returned with a small ringing in the ears, the kind quiet leaves. Liza dropped to a crouch, laughing and swearing at the same time, the camera clutched like a relic. Alex stared at the calendar with its pin-up grin frozen in December 1968 and knew exactly how far away that year suddenly wasn't. On the display window of the module, the anchor icon faded to a soft idle glow. Proof lay at their feet. Red dust on their shoes, a folded newspaper now damp with sweat, the faint scent of jet fuel clinging to his shirt. Liza leaned her head against the machine. "We did it," she whispered. "We broke the skin of time." Alex looked down at his hands and wondered, not for the last time, what else they had broken. The room seemed smaller, the world bigger. The door's old steel face felt like a hinge between centuries. "If it works once, it will work again," he said, though he meant, "if we can go there, we could go anywhere." The machine's brass nameplate caught a sympathetic spark from the fluorescence. Project Janus, two faces looking in opposite directions. Liza stood, squared her shoulders, and slung the camera strap tight. "Next time we're not showing up like tourists," she said, a fierce light in her eyes. He knew then there would be a next time, and that whatever came of it would not be satisfied with 10 minutes, or with witnesses. Outside, in a world that had not yet heard what they had done, the sun was going down. The decision to return didn't come immediately. Back in their modern lives, Alex and Liza spent restless nights reviewing Liza's footage and Alex's notes. The thrill of the jump lingered like a drug, but so did the warnings in the manual. Temporal paradoxes could ripple outward, unseen until too late. Alex's father had been a Vietnam veteran, a silent man haunted by ghosts from the war, dying young from Agent Orange exposure. "If we could warn them," Alex confessed one evening over whiskey, "prevent even one mistake." Liza, whose own career had been built on exposing government cover-ups, nodded slowly. "But we can't change it. Not without consequences." Yet the pull was too strong. 3 weeks later, they calibrated the machine for a longer stay, packing supplies and disguises. This time, they aimed not just to witness but to immerse, to understand the war from the inside, or so they told themselves. The jungle heat pressed on them like a living weight, each breath heavy with moisture and the resinous scent of foliage. By the second day, Alex and Liza had accepted they couldn't wander around Saigon with the casual air of tourists. Too many eyes, too many uniforms. Alex suggested a disguise born from his studies. American advisors were flooding into Vietnam in 1965, moving through towns and villages in small detachments. They could pass as two of them. Paperwork might be spotty, accents excused by stress. It was dangerous, but safer than sticking out as two strangers with no explanation for their presence. Liza, brushing a strand of sweat-wet hair from her face, muttered, "So the historian becomes the soldier, and the journalist his shadow. That's a headline I'll never get to write." They bartered for second-hand fatigues from a street merchant who swore they had belonged to a GI heading home. The uniforms were worn thin, patches askew, but in a city teeming with hurried foreigners, appearance mattered more than detail. Alex adjusted his collar in the mirror shard nailed to a pole and felt absurd, an academic in borrowed war paint. Liza looked sharper, her journalistic poise translating easily into the stiff-backed bearing of someone used to command. "If anyone asks," she said with a grin that masked her nerves, "I'm your interpreter, and you're the guy with all the maps." He almost corrected her, historian. But the word felt useless now, irrelevant in a place where history hadn't yet been written. Their first encounter with real American troops came sooner than expected. A jeep rolled into the village square where they had been scouting, dust spiraling in its wake. Two officers stepped out, lean men with hard eyes softened by exhaustion. They glanced at Alex and Liza, not with suspicion but with recognition. "New transfers?" one asked. Alex's heart skipped, but he forced his voice steady. "Just got in. Still finding our bearings." The officer clapped him on the shoulder, all comradely fatigue. "You'll get used to the heat. Everyone does, until they don't." And just like that, they were folded into the stream of soldiers moving through the streets, camouflaged by assumption. At night, in a borrowed tent on the edge of a training ground, they whispered like conspirators. Liza wrote notes in a small leather-bound journal, her words terse, unembellished, as if afraid too much ink might summon attention. "We're inside the story now," she said, staring at the page. "Not recording it, living it. Do you realize what that means?" Alex did. He lay staring at the canvas above, listening to the rhythmic crackle of distant gunfire, and thought of timelines bending, of pages torn from books that hadn't yet been bound. "It means," he answered softly, "that we could change it." The temptation came quickly. A young sergeant, barely 20, asked Alex if he'd heard anything about the enemy's movements upriver. The sergeant's tone was casual, but his eyes held the brittle weight of fear. Alex's historian's brain knew too much, knew where ambushes would fall, knew which villages would burn. He bit his tongue hard enough to taste copper, but the thought lingered like a fever. What if he told them? What if he saved this boy, and the dozen others who would die before the week was out? "Don't," Liza whispered later, when she saw the turmoil in his face. "We're here to observe, not to play God." But she didn't sound convinced. Neither of them did. Each day the masquerade deepened. They joined patrols, marched through villages where children watched with wary eyes, and scribbled their own notes in secret. Alex caught himself analyzing the smallest interactions. One colonel's confidence, one villager's whispered warning, and imagining how a single altered detail might ripple outward. The historian in him craved preservation, but the man, sweating under a soldier's cap, began to crave action. Liza, more grounded, reminded him of the stakes. "Every story I've ever written about war," she told him, "is about people thinking they can control it, and they never can. Don't let us become part of the same lie." Still, the war pressed close. Helicopters drummed overhead, carrying troops to battles Alex could name from memory but which, here, were yet to be fought. Newspapers bore headlines he had studied in archives, only now they were fresh ink. And each time he saw the date March-April 1965, he felt the weight of inevitability. He knew what escalation would bring. He knew how the body counts would climb. And though he told himself restraint was the safest path, the question gnawed at him each night as the crickets sang. If you knew tomorrow's tragedy, could you really walk away without trying to stop it? By the end of their first week in the past, the two of them were no longer invisible observers. They were fixtures in the camp, accepted by soldiers who never doubted their cover. The disguise had worked, but Alex and Liza both understood that with every nod, every casual salute, every conversation with men whose fates were already written, they were sliding further from safety and deeper into temptation. The machine that had brought them here was their anchor, hidden and waiting. Yet already, history was tugging at them, whispering promises of change. And though neither dared to say it aloud, both knew. The longer they stayed, the harder it would be to resist answering that whisper. The afternoon sun painted everything in harsh contrasts. Jungle greens too vivid, shadows too black. Alex and Liza had just returned from a supply run with a small convoy when they first met Captain Daniel. He was younger than Alex expected for an officer, broad-shouldered and clean-cut, his smile quick but not careless. He carried himself like a man who had learned too fast how fragile command could be. Spotting the two new advisors in their borrowed fatigues, he approached with the easy authority of someone who wanted to know every face under his watch. "Don't remember seeing you two on the roster," he said, offering his hand. Alex forced his grip steady, replying, "Transferred from a training unit, sir. Just settling in." Daniel studied him for a moment. Sharp blue eyes that seemed to measure more than his words. Then he grinned. "Well, welcome to the madhouse. We need all the brains we can get." He motioned toward Liza. "Interpreter." She nodded quickly, adding, "And field support." It wasn't a lie, but not the truth either. That evening, over tin cups of bitter coffee near the command tent, Daniel talked with them as if they were old friends. He shared stories of ambushes that had left his men shaken, of villages that seemed friendly one day and hostile the next. "It's a war with no front lines," he said, tapping his temple. "You win it here or you don't win it at all." Liza listened intently, her journalist's instincts catching every nuance. Alex, though, felt the weight of knowing too much. He could hear the echoes of future headlines in every word Daniel spoke. Unbeknownst to them, Daniel was no ordinary captain. His letters home, which Alex had once read in a museum archive, revealed a man torn between duty and doubt, a pacifist at heart forced into uniform by draft and family legacy. Over the following days, Daniel began including them in briefings. He asked Alex's opinion on patrol routes, on supply lines, on which terrain seemed safest. Alex answered cautiously, drawing on his academic knowledge of Vietnam's geography, always careful not to reveal the true source of his certainty. Yet the more he spoke, the more Daniel's trust grew. "You've got a knack for this?" the captain remarked one night. "Like you can see the battlefield before it happens." Alex forced a laugh, but inside his chest tightened. How long before Daniel asked the questions Alex couldn't answer? Liza, meanwhile, grew closer to Daniel in a different way. She admired his sincerity, his care for the men under his command. But that trust also frightened her. Late one night, while they crouched over the dim glow of a lantern, she whispered, "He believes in us. Alex, he believes in us. And every word we say digs the hole deeper. What happens when he realizes we don't belong here?" Alex didn't answer right away. He was staring at Daniel across the campfire, watching the captain laugh with his soldiers, and wondering if this man, so decent, so alive, would even survive the year. In the original timeline, Daniel's unit would be wiped out in a 1966 offensive. His death certificate listed him as Kia, leaving behind a widow and unborn child. The breaking point came after a skirmish in the jungle. Their unit had been ambushed, and it was only Alex's shouted warning, an instinct born not from sight but from memory, that saved them from walking straight into a kill zone. When the smoke cleared and the shaken soldiers regrouped, Daniel fixed Alex with a look that lingered long after. Later, as they washed the mud from their boots at the edge of camp, Daniel said quietly, "That wasn't luck. You knew." "How?" Alex froze, words tangling in his throat. Liza jumped in, smiling tightly. "He's read too many after-action reports. He notices patterns, that's all." Daniel didn't reply. He only nodded slowly, as though filing the answer away for later inspection. The silence between the three of them stretched thin, almost fragile. Trust had been planted, but so had suspicion. That night, when the camp had gone still except for the hum of insects, Alex lay awake, replaying the moment over and over. For the first time since stepping into the past, he realized how dangerous their secret truly was. It wasn't only the war pressing in from the jungle. It was the eyes of a man who wanted to trust them but was beginning to wonder who they really were, and what they were hiding. The night was heavy with the sound of cicadas, their endless chorus rising and falling like a tide. Alex and Liza sat on the edge of the camp, their boots in the dust, the glow of the watchfires painting their faces in flickers of orange. Daniel had turned in after a long day, but his lingering suspicion hung in the air like smoke. Liza broke the silence first. "He's watching you," she murmured. "Every word, every glance. You're too sharp for your own good." Alex didn't deny it. Instead, he stared past the trees where the jungle swallowed the horizon. "Liza, you realize what this is, don't you? We're standing at the hinge of history. I know where this war leads, what it costs. 58,000 American dead. millions of Vietnamese. Whole villages burned from maps. And here we are, inside the story before it's written. We could stop it. His voice was hushed but urgent, trembling with conviction. The manual had warned of feedback loops, changes that amplified, turning small alterations into cataclysms. But Alex pushed the thought aside, driven by his father's unspoken pain. She turned to him sharply. Stop it? Alex, listen to yourself. You're talking about rewriting history like it's a term paper you can edit. You don't know what happens if you pull one thread. You've studied history, you know what happens when people try to control it. He leaned closer, his eyes fever-bright. But that's exactly it. All my life, history's been something I could only observe. Dates and numbers, names carved in stone. Now I can change it. I can stop the mistakes before they happen. He hesitated, lowering his voice to a near whisper. What if saving one battle, one life, sets off a chain that prevents the escalation altogether? Liza's face was unreadable in the firelight. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the hope in his words. But her instincts screamed caution. Or maybe it makes it worse. Maybe it costs twice as many lives. Maybe it breaks the world in ways we can't even imagine. She pulled her knees to her chest, hugging them tightly. We aren't gods, Alex. We're two people stuck where we don't belong. That machine doesn't make us saviors. It makes us dangerous. The jungle seemed to lean in around them, the crackle of distant gunfire a reminder of how close the war already was. Alex buried his face in his hands, the enormity of his thoughts pressing down. Every day I see these soldiers laughing, playing cards, writing letters home, and I know half of them won't live to send another one. How do I stand by and do nothing, knowing what's coming? His voice cracked, raw with guilt. Liza touched his arm gently, her tone softer now. Because sometimes doing nothing is the only way to protect everything. History is fragile. It's not a draft we can rewrite without consequences. Promise me, Alex, promise me you won't rush into this. But he didn't promise. He looked back toward the dark horizon, where the future he carried in his memory clashed with the present breathing around him. And in the silence that stretched between them, Liza understood something that chilled her. Alex wasn't asking if he would act. He was already deciding when. Dawn bled into the jungle with a mist that clung low to the ground, ghostly and damp. Alex stood at the edge of the camp, map spread across a crate, his hands trembling. Not from fear, but from decision. He knew what would happen today. In the history he had studied, a convoy would be ambushed just beyond the village, a brutal fight that would claim dozens of lives. He could see the names etched in memory, even the black and white photographs of those young faces. And yet here, now, they were alive, laughing over breakfast, sharpening knives, playing cards. Liza appeared beside him, bleary-eyed but sharp. You're thinking about it, aren't you? She whispered. Her gaze dropped to the map. Alex didn't answer, but his silence spoke for him. She exhaled, long and heavy. If you do this, there's no turning back. You'll be responsible for every change that follows. He closed the map with a snap. Then let me be responsible. Better that than standing by and watching history butcher them again. When Captain Daniel called for his briefing, Alex seized the moment. Sir, he said carefully, I've been studying local reports. There's chatter about movement near the river bend. If you send the convoy along the western route, you'll be walking into an ambush. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you know that? Alex forced a calm smile. Patterns. The terrain is perfect for a strike. If I were Viet Cong, that's where I'd set it. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. All right, we'll divert east. Can't hurt to be cautious. Around them, officers scribbled adjustments, and orders rippled outward through the camp. Alex's chest tightened. He had done it. He had shifted the first stone in the river of time. Liza's hand brushed his arm as if to anchor him. She said nothing, but the worry in her eyes was louder than any words. Hours later, the convoy rolled forward under a hazy sun. Alex and Liza rode in the back of a jeep, every muscle taut with expectation. As they passed the fateful bend, the jungle stayed still. No bursts of gunfire, no explosions, no cries for help. Instead, silence stretched, broken only by the hum of engines and the buzz of cicadas. For a moment Alex allowed himself to believe he had done it. He had saved them. The attack came later, but not where history had written it. Scouts reported skirmishes on the old route, ambushers left waiting in vain. And at the new site, Daniel's men struck first. The Viet Cong, caught off guard, fell quickly. What might have been a massacre of Americans became a swift, decisive victory. Soldiers cheered, their confidence renewed, their voices carrying through the trees like a hymn. Back at camp, Daniel clasped Alex on the shoulder. "You were right. Damn lucky call." His smile was broad, his gratitude genuine. "You may have just saved this entire operation." The men toasted him that night with stolen whiskey, laughter rising above the sound of distant mortars. To them, Alex was a hero. But in the quiet afterward, when the fire burned low and the men slept off their celebration, Alex sat alone, staring at the stars through the humid veil of the night sky. His heart swelled with pride and dread in equal measure. He had changed the script. History was no longer unyielding stone. It was clay in his hands. Liza joined him silently, pressing her knees to her chest. "They lived," Alex whispered. "They weren't supposed to, and they did." His voice cracked with a mix of triumph and guilt. Liza's reply was sharp but soft, like a blade wrapped in cloth. "Yes, they lived. But Alex, what else have you changed?" He didn't answer, because already, deep down, he knew the truth. Saving lives today meant rewriting tomorrow. And the future he thought he knew was already beginning to unravel. The jungle roared with the echo of the victory. Word of the ambush averted spread like wildfire through the camp and beyond. Men who had been weary, doubtful, even half-broken, suddenly stood taller. They boasted that the tide was turning, that maybe this war could be won quickly if they just struck harder, faster. Alex watched the change with uneasy eyes. He had wanted to save lives, not fuel new hunger for battle. Unrevealed in his initial studies was how fragile the U.S. command structure was in 1965. A single early win could embolden hawks in Washington, pushing for more troops sooner than the original timeline's gradual buildup. In the command tent, Daniel briefed his superiors with renewed fire. Maps were unrolled, markers shifted. "We caught the enemy flat-footed. If we keep pushing east, we can break their supply lines before they regroup." His words carried weight, and the higher-ups nodded, emboldened by the fresh taste of victory. Alex sat in the corner, silent, as generals spoke of larger operations, deeper strikes into enemy territory. The word invasion surfaced like a shark's fin. That night, Liza confronted him. "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear them? This isn't what you wanted." Her voice shook with anger. "You thought you were saving lives, but you've just given them the excuse to spill twice as much blood." Alex clenched his fists. "I didn't ask them to escalate. I just what?" She cut in. "Just nudged history a little?" "Alex, that nudge has already turned into an avalanche." Days later, the escalation became real. Helicopters thundered overhead in numbers Alex had never seen in the records for this stage of the war. Columns of troops poured into villages, sweeping through with overwhelming force. Where once there had been cautious skirmishes, now there was fire and destruction. Entire hamlets were uprooted, families scattered into the jungle. Liza filmed quietly, her lens capturing the faces of terrified civilians, the burnt-out shells of homes, the hollow stares of men who thought they were liberators. At first, Daniel celebrated. He praised Alex for his insight, for giving them the edge. "This is it," he said one evening, raising a tin cup in toast. "This is how we end it fast." But as the weeks stretched on, his smile grew thinner, his shoulders heavier. The casualty lists lengthened, and not just among soldiers. Reports came in of civilian deaths, hundreds at first, then thousands. Villages destroyed on suspicion alone. What had begun as a tactical success was spiraling into a harsher, bloodier conflict than Alex had ever read in his history books. Alex lay awake at night, tormented by the cries he heard in memory. Children clutching their mothers, elders begging soldiers to spare their homes. This was not the history he knew. It was worse, twisted by his hand. "We made it crueler," he admitted one night, voice cracking as he sat with Liza beneath the stars. She didn't answer at first, only stared at him through the dark. Finally, she said, "You wanted to save them, and now? You've made us killers with clean hands." The weight of it pressed down on him with unbearable force. He had studied wars all his life, but always at a distance. Cold numbers on a page, analysis through the safety of time. Now every decision, every whisper, every lucky suggestion carried blood on it. Liza's journal grew darker with each entry. Her words no longer detached observations but bitter accusations. "We broke the story," she wrote one night, "and the ending is worse than the original." Alex stood at the edge of the camp the next morning, watching helicopters rise into the smoky dawn, their blades chopping the sky with mechanical fury. His gamble had succeeded, he had altered the timeline. But as he stared at the line of refugees trailing into the jungle, their lives shattered by the war he had inflamed, a hollow truth gnawed at him. Sometimes saving lives today meant damning countless others tomorrow, and there was no undoing the path he had set in motion. Rain fell in heavy curtains, turning the camp into a swamp of mud and restless nerves. Soldiers huddled under makeshift tarps, smoking, muttering, cleaning rifles that would be wet again in an hour. Alex sat at a wooden table in the mess tent, staring at a half-finished cup of coffee gone cold. Across from him, Captain Daniel leaned forward, elbows planted, his eyes sharp in the dim lantern light. "You've got one hell of an instinct, Alex," Daniel said, his voice casual, but the weight beneath it unmistakable. "Too good. Men call it luck, but I've seen enough war to know luck doesn't strike twice. Or 3 times. He let the silence linger before continuing. "So tell me, where does it come from? Who are you really?" Alex forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. "I told you. Training, reports, patterns. That's all." Daniel didn't smile. He tapped his fingers on the table. "Patterns don't explain the way you called that ambush, or the timing of that river crossing. You knew before anyone else, before even our intel. That's not training. That's something else." From the far side of the tent, Liza watched, pretending to scribble in her notebook. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She could see Daniel's suspicion growing, wrapping itself around Alex like a noose. Later, when they were alone, she hissed, "He's onto us. If you keep pushing, he'll start digging. And when he digs, he'll find nothing. Do you understand? Nothing. We don't exist here." But Alex couldn't back down. Guilt had carved lines into his face, and the weight of the altered war gnawed at him. "Maybe if he knew," Alex whispered. "If we trusted him, he could help us." Liza's eyes widened in disbelief. "Help us? Alex, he's a soldier. His loyalty is to command, not to us. You tell him the truth, and we're finished." The next day, Daniel cornered Alex again, this time outside the medical tent. His tone was firmer now, stripped of camaraderie. "I need straight answers. No more riddles. Who sent you here? CIA? Some black project?" He leaned closer, his breath mixing with the rain-soaked air. "You're not just another advisor. I can feel it. And I don't like being lied to." Alex swallowed hard, his mind racing. He wanted to tell him, wanted to unburden the terrible truth of the machine, of the future they were desperately trying not to destroy. But he caught Liza's gaze from across the compound, her subtle shake of the head. He forced a smile. "You're right," he said softly. "I'm not like the others, but you'll just have to trust that I'm on your side." Daniel studied him for a long, painful moment. Finally, he stepped back, though suspicion still burned in his eyes. "On my side or not," he muttered. "If I catch you lying again, I'll put you in cuffs myself." He walked away, leaving Alex drenched in both rain and dread. That night, Liza confronted him again. "It's slipping," she said, voice low but fierce. The more you talk, the more he'll notice. You think you can carry this lie forever? Alex buried his face in his hands. I don't know. But the longer we're here, the more impossible it gets. The storm raged on outside, thunder rolling like artillery. Inside, their fragile alliance with Daniel began to fracture. Trust had carried them this far, but suspicion now crept in, threatening to tear everything apart. And Alex couldn't shake the chilling thought. When the moment came, Daniel would have to choose between protecting them or exposing them, and Alex no longer knew which way he would lean. The heat of the day gave way to a smoky dusk, the air thick with the smell of burning villages. Columns of refugees streamed past the camp. Women clutching babies, old men bent under bundles, children wide-eyed and silent. Alex watched them, his chest a knot of shame. He had read about these people in books, faceless numbers in casualty reports, but now they were here, flesh and blood, the victims of choices he had helped set in motion. One woman met his eyes as she passed, her gaze accusatory, as if she knew he was an interloper from a future that had condemned her. That night, the camp celebrated another victory. Soldiers sang around a fire, their voices raw with whiskey and bravado. Daniel raised a tin cup, praising the tactics that had turned yet another skirmish into an American win. To everyone else, it was triumph. To Alex, it was a nightmare. He slipped away, unable to bear the laughter that rang against the backdrop of civilian screams still echoing in his memory. Liza found him on the edge of the jungle, hunched over, his hands gripping his knees. I thought I was saving them, he whispered, his voice cracked. I thought stopping one battle, one ambush would save lives. But look around you. I've lit the fire that's burning them alive. She crouched in front of him, her expression tight, torn between pity and anger. You played God, Alex. You decided who gets to live and who dies, and now the scales are tipping in ways you can't control. You wanted to rewrite history, but history is writing us into the story instead. His eyes brimmed, though he tried to hold them steady. If we just push a little harder, if we guide them carefully, maybe we can turn it again. Make it better this time. No! Liza snapped, her voice low but fierce. Don't you see? Every time you touch it, it twists worse. You think you're a savior, but you're just another hand feeding the war machine. She stood, pacing in the shadows. And I'm complicit because I didn't stop you. I should have destroyed that damned machine the moment we got back. Her words struck him harder than any bullet. The bond that had held them together, the shared wonder, the secret, the danger, was fracturing. For the first time, Alex felt the cold space opening between them, the gulf of choices they could no longer agree on. From the camp came the crack of celebratory gunfire, the sound mingling with distant cries of displaced villagers. Alex pressed his palms to his face, trying to shut it all out. Liza's voice softened then, but it carried no comfort. You're not just fighting the war, Alex. You've become part of it. And if you keep going, I don't know if I can follow you. He lowered his hands slowly, staring into the dark where the refugees had disappeared, swallowed by the night. The victory felt hollow, poisonous. The weight of lives saved was crushed under the avalanche of lives lost. And as the silence stretched between him and Liza, Alex understood the truth. The war outside was nothing compared to the war tearing them apart. The basement lights flickered to life as the machine roared and then went still. For a breathless moment, Alex and Liza thought they had slipped back into safety, into the world they knew. But when the door creaked open, the air smelled different. Sharper, metallic, heavy with exhaust. They climbed the stairs, their shoes leaving faint streaks of jungle mud, and emerged into a city they almost recognized. Almost. The skyline was jagged with steel towers bristling with antennas and floodlights. Helicopters droned constantly overhead, not as transport but as guardians, searchlights sweeping the streets below. Billboards bore the stars and stripes, but the slogans beneath were chilling. Strength through power. Eternal victory. Soldiers in dark green uniforms patrolled every corner, their rifles gleaming, their expressions cold. This was home twisted, a mirror warped beyond recognition. The early wins in Vietnam had boosted American militarism. Without the drawn-out quagmire and anti-war protests of the original timeline, the U.S. had conquered Hanoi by 1967, then turned its gaze to Cuba, Laos, and beyond, evolving into an empire that suppressed dissent at home with iron-fisted surveillance. God, Liza whispered, clutching Alex's arm. What did we do? They ducked into an alley, their hearts racing as a column of armored vehicles passed. The flags were the same, but the America they loved was gone, replaced by something harder, crueler. A soldier barked orders through a loudspeaker, his accent thick with authority. Curfew, identification checks. Every passerby obeyed with fearful silence. Alex pulled Liza into the shadows, his voice low and hoarse. We gave them too much power. The victories, the early confidence, it didn't end the war. It rewrote the country. He swallowed hard. They won in Vietnam, and it turned us into this. They slipped into a bookstore that had been converted into a government archive. Behind glass, newspapers hung like relics. Alex's eyes scanned the headlines. Saigon Falls, 1966. America triumphs. Soviet Union rearms. Cold War heats. And then the most recent. Nuclear strike threatens Eastern Europe. His breath caught. The war hadn't ended. It had spread, igniting the world like dry tinder. Proxy conflicts had escalated into direct confrontations, with U.S. forces occupying half of Asia and Europe teetering on the brink. Liza's hands trembled as she traced the words. This is it. This is the dark future they warn about in nightmares. The machine didn't just change Vietnam, it unbalanced everything. We've set the whole world on fire. She turned to Alex, eyes blazing. We have to go back. We have to undo it before it's too late. Outside, air raid sirens wailed. The city bathed in crimson light. Jets screamed overhead. For a heartbeat, Alex and Liza stood frozen, the sound rattling their bones. Then Alex grabbed her hand. You're right. We can't stay. We fix this, or there won't be a world left to return to. They ran through streets thick with soldiers and propaganda, slipping between searchlights, chased by the weight of what they had unleashed. The machine was their only hope now, but the thought gnawed at both of them. Could history ever truly be repaired, or would every attempt only break it further? As the night burned around them, one truth hardened in Alex's mind. Whatever happened, the historian was no longer an observer. He was already the author of a catastrophe, and there would be no footnotes to save him from what came next. The basement swallowed them once again, the hum of the machine fading into silence. Alex collapsed against the wall, his chest heaving, while Liza clutched the edge of the console, her face pale under the flickering lights. The world outside, an America transformed into a militarized empire, still burned in their minds. Neither spoke at first. They didn't need to. The enormity of their mistake pressed down heavier than the concrete above them. Finally, Alex broke the silence. We can't leave it like this. Every second we stay in our time, that world grows worse. We have to go back. To 65. Undo everything. His voice cracked, but it carried a conviction that chilled Liza. She turned to him, trembling. Back? Alex, last time nearly destroyed the world. What if we only make it worse? He shook his head fiercely. It's already worse. We gave them the early victory, the arrogance to push harder. If we don't erase that, it spirals into the future we just saw. We caused this. It's on us to put it right. Liza sank into a chair, her hands covering her face. She remembered the refugees' hollow eyes, the children clutching mothers as homes burned. She remembered the soldiers cheering Alex's foresight. And now, the shadow of nuclear war looming over the globe. Slowly, she lowered her hands. If we go back, it won't just be the Viet Cong hunting us. Daniel suspects us already. And if the brass gets wind of who we are... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. As if summoned by her words, the sound of boots echoed above the basement door. Shadows moved against the thin light beneath it. Alex grabbed Liza's arm, pulling her closer to the machine. They know, he whispered. They must have followed us. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Military intelligence, government agents, whoever they weren't here for friendly questions. In this altered timeline, Project Janus's remnants had been weaponized. Rumors in the archives they skimmed spoke of time sentinels patrolling for anomalies. The door handle rattled. A voice barked, "Open up!" Alex's eyes met Liza's, and for a moment the weight of history pressed into their locked gaze. Then, with a decisive breath, he activated the controls. Blue light flared, the machine screaming to life. The door splintered behind them, figures rushing in. But in the same heartbeat, the world dissolved. Heat, humidity, the roar of cicadas, the jungle's suffocating green folded around them again. They had returned not to safety, but to the war itself. The camp loomed in the distance, smoke rising in lazy spirals, the sound of helicopters thudding overhead. Alex and Liza staggered to their feet, mud sucking at their boots. "This time," Alex said, steadying himself, "we don't interfere to save lives. We interfere to fix what we broke." His jaw tightened as he looked toward the camp, knowing Daniel would not welcome them back as friends. "But they'll never let us near the front again without questions. We'll be hunted from both sides." Liza swallowed hard, pulling the strap of her camera bag tight across her shoulder. "Then we stay ahead of them, long enough to set history straight." In the distance, gunfire cracked, rolling like thunder through the valley. The war was still raging, and now so was the clock. Their second chance had begun, but this time, they weren't stepping in as observers. They were stepping back into a battlefield where every move would be a fight to rewrite not just history, but their own survival. The camp felt different when they returned. The same smells of diesel, sweat, and gun oil hung in the air, but the atmosphere was sharper now, more suspicious. Eyes lingered on Alex and Liza as they entered. Too long, too intent. Word had spread, whispers chasing them like shadows. Their sudden disappearance during the last jump had been noticed. Soldiers murmured about deserters or worse. Captain Daniel found them quickly. His uniform was dust-stained, his expression taut. "Thought you two disappeared," he said flatly, no smile, no warmth. "Men said you were gone for days. Then you show up like nothing happened. Care to explain?" His gaze cut straight through their flimsy cover stories, weighing every word, every pause. Alex forced a steady tone. "We were scouting, gathering information. Off the books." Liza added, "We've seen movements, things you'll want to know." Daniel's jaw tightened. He studied them for a long moment, then jerked his head toward the command tent. "Fine, talk. But if you're lying..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Inside the dimly lit tent, maps sprawled across a table, pins marking villages and river crossings. Daniel leaned against the edge, arms crossed. "Start talking." Alex exchanged a glance with Liza before stepping forward. He pointed to a series of routes leading north. "The enemy's supply chain here, it's more vulnerable than you realize. If you don't act soon, you'll lose your chance to cripple it." Daniel's eyes narrowed, again with the perfect predictions. He tapped the table with his finger, each rap deliberate. "Either you're psychic or you're hiding something. Which is it?" Alex hesitated, but Liza cut in quickly, her voice calm. "We're on your side. That's all that matters. You want to win, don't you?" Daniel didn't respond right away. His gaze shifted between them, suspicion burning deeper. Finally, he spoke. "I'll use your intel for now, but you're not free agents anymore. From this moment, you work under me. You answer to me, and if I smell even a hint of betrayal..." He let the threat hang. That night, sitting by a lantern in their tent, Liza whispered fiercely, "We can't keep this up. He's not buying it, Alex. One wrong step and he'll hand us over." Alex rubbed his temples, exhaustion etched into his face. "We don't have a choice. We need him. He's the only way to get close enough to steer things back on track." The next morning, they joined Daniel on a reconnaissance mission. Marching through the jungle, surrounded by men who trusted Daniel more than life itself, Alex felt the weight of a trap closing. Every suggestion he made was measured, every glance from Daniel sharp with doubt. It was a dangerous game, feeding just enough truth to stay useful while guarding the secret that would damn them if it slipped. At dusk, after a tense day of scouting, Daniel pulled Alex aside. His voice was low, hard. "You're playing a dangerous game, my friend. You think I don't notice the way you two look at each other before answering? The way you hesitate just a second too long." His eyes bored into Alex's. "I don't know what you're hiding, but when I find out, God help you." As Daniel walked away, Liza appeared from the shadows. She had heard enough to know the walls were closing in. "He doesn't trust us anymore," she whispered. Alex nodded grimly. "Then we stay one step ahead. We have to, because if Daniel decides we're the enemy, we'll never get the chance to fix the mess we made." And as the jungle hummed with the cries of night creatures, both of them understood. They weren't allies anymore. They were prisoners of Daniel's suspicion, playing a double game where one mistake could end not just their mission, but their lives. The rain had stopped, leaving the jungle steaming, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and cordite. Alex crouched over a captured radio, listening to transmissions they weren't meant to hear. His face grew paler with every garbled word. Liza leaned close, straining to catch his expression more than the static-laced messages. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight. Alex's throat worked before he could speak. "It's worse than we thought. Our interference, it's pulled bigger players in. The Soviets and the Chinese aren't standing back anymore. They're funneling men, weapons, advisors, more openly, more aggressively. This isn't the same war I studied. It's expanding, Liza. It's tipping toward something global." In the original history, Soviet and Chinese support had been covert. Now, emboldened by America's aggressive push, they were committing troops, risking a direct clash that could ignite World War III. She closed her eyes, dread washing over her. So our brilliant rescue of one convoy might have just bought the planet a world war. Before Alex could answer, Daniel entered the tent. His expression was grim, but not because of the intel they realized he had already suspected. He planted his hands on the table, leaning over them. "You said you wanted to help win, but look outside, this isn't winning. The enemy's stronger, bolder, and we're digging deeper into a fight we can't climb out of. Now I need the truth." The silence stretched. Liza shot Alex a look. "Don't you dare." But Alex, worn down by guilt and fear, said quietly, "If we don't act, the war won't just stay here. It'll spread across borders, across continents. Millions could die. Nuclear war isn't just a possibility. It's imminent." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And how do you know that? You talk like you've already seen it happen." His hand drifted toward the pistol on his belt. The air in the tent turned to glass, brittle and ready to shatter. Liza stepped in quickly, her words sharp, desperate. "We don't have time for explanations. What matters is that we know. And if we can't undo what's been set in motion within days, maybe hours, the whole world burns." Outside, the jungle echoed with distant gunfire, a reminder of how little control they already had. Daniel stared at them, suspicion warring with something else. Fear. Finally, he muttered, "Then prove it. Show me something I can't ignore. Otherwise, I turn you both over to command, and they'll wring your secrets out of you one way or another." That night, Alex and Liza huddled in the shadows, whispering like fugitives. "We're running out of time," Alex said, his voice ragged. "Every timeline I can imagine ends in disaster if we don't reset this. We need to stop the escalation before the Soviets or the Chinese throw everything in." Liza hugged her knees, her face pale in the moonlight. "And how exactly do we stop a world war, Alex? By telling the truth? By destroying the machine? By sacrificing ourselves?" She paused, her voice breaking. "I don't even know if there's a way back anymore." The jungle pulsed around them, insects buzzing like static, the war pressing closer every hour. For the first time, both of them understood with terrible clarity. Their window to fix history was closing fast. If they failed, they wouldn't just doom Vietnam, they would doom the entire world. The morning broke gray and heavy, the mist rolling low across the camp. Alex woke to the sound of boots outside the tent, sharp and purposeful. Before he could rise, the flap burst open. Daniel stood framed in the pale light, his jaw clenched, eyes like steel. Behind him, 2 armed soldiers waited. "Get up," Daniel ordered. His voice was low, dangerous. "Both of you." Liza's heart hammered in her chest. "Daniel, what's going on?" she asked, though she already knew. He didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on Alex. "You think I'm a fool? I've watched you pull miracles out of thin air. Speak about this war like you've already read the ending. No reports, no intel, just knowledge. You're not who you claim to be. And I won't let my men bleed for secrets I don't understand." He motioned with his hand. The soldiers stepped forward, rifles raised. Alex felt his stomach twist as they were dragged from the tent, wrists bound with coarse rope. Around the camp, curious eyes followed. Men they had marched with, laughed with, men who once toasted their victories. Now those same faces looked at them with suspicion, even hatred. Liza stumbled beside him, whispering urgently, "Stay calm. If they find the machine, if they find anything, we're finished." They were shoved into a makeshift stockade, a bamboo cage near the edge of the compound. Daniel stood just outside, his expression carved from stone. "Command's coming to question you. They'll decide what to do. If you're spies, if you're saboteurs, if you're hell, I don't even know. But I won't protect you anymore." His voice faltered for just a heartbeat, softer now. "I wanted to trust you. God help me, I did trust you. But you left me no choice." The cage door slammed shut, the lock snapping into place. The sound echoed like a verdict. Hours dragged by. Alex paced the small space, his thoughts spiraling. The machine, they had hidden it, buried under canvas and crates not far from camp. But if Daniel searched too thoroughly, he might stumble on it. If command arrived first, it could be seized, studied, turned into a weapon beyond imagination. In whispers, Liza revealed a fear she hadn't shared before. Her own brother had died in Vietnam in the original timeline, a fact that fueled her reluctance to change too much. Liza sat with her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes fixed on the muddy ground. "This is it," she whispered. "We're out of moves. We don't even have each other anymore. Daniel's cut us off. He's killed our last chance." Alex dropped beside her, his voice breaking. "I thought he'd believe in us. I thought he'd see that we weren't enemies." She lifted her head, her face pale but fierce. "No, Alex. He saw exactly what we are. Strangers who don't belong here with knowledge no one should have. From his view, he's right. We're the danger." Through the bamboo slats, Alex saw Daniel watching from across the compound, arms folded, his silhouette framed by the dim light of lanterns. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met, and Alex saw not triumph but torment etched into the captain's features. He wasn't a man at ease with his decision, but he was resolute. Deep down, Daniel's doubt stemmed from his own secret. Intercepted letters showed he had begun questioning the war, writing anonymous reports to superiors about civilian atrocities. Reports that, in the original history, got him labeled a traitor before his death. As night fell, the jungle's song rose around them. The chirping of insects, the distant rumble of artillery, the low murmur of soldiers sharing rumors about the spies in the cage. Alex sat against the bamboo, the ropes biting his wrists, and realized with sick certainty that their mission, their machine, and their future were slipping away. The past they had tried to reshape was turning against them, one ally at a time. And this time, it wasn't the enemy with rifles in the trees. It was the very man who had once called them friends. The night split open with gunfire. Shouts ripped through the camp, flares streaked the sky, and the jungle erupted with the battle cry of the Viet Cong. The ground trembled as mortars struck, sending showers of dirt and fire into the air. Alex and Liza were thrown awake inside the bamboo cage, the roar of chaos drowning out their own panicked breaths. Soldiers sprinted past, shouting orders, rifles blazing into the darkness. Then came the crack of splintering wood. A mortar had landed close, shattering part of the stockade. Smoke and dust swirled in the air. Alex, wrists still bound, seized the chance. He rammed his shoulder against the fractured bamboo, again and again, until the slats gave way. Liza scrambled after him, coughing from the acrid haze. "This is it," she shouted above the din. "We run now or we never run at all." They stumbled into the burning camp. Bodies lay sprawled, the wounded screaming for medics as shadows flitted through the smoke. Viet Cong fighters breaking through the perimeter. In the chaos, Daniel appeared, blood on his sleeve, barking orders as he tried to rally his men. His eyes locked with Alex's across the firelit hell. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that gaze. Anger, betrayal, and something like regret. But then another explosion tore the moment apart, and Alex pulled Liza into the jungle's cover. Breathless, hearts hammering, they reached the clearing where the machine was hidden beneath canvas and crates. The glow of tracers lit the sky behind them like cursed stars. Alex tore the ropes from his wrists, blood rushing back into his numb hands. He uncovered the machine, its brass and wires glinting faintly in the firelight. "There's only one way left," he said hoarsely. "We can't keep patching history. We have to erase everything we've done. Wipe our interference clean." Liza's eyes widened. "Erase it? Alex, what does that even mean?" He met her gaze, his expression raw, resolute. "It means looping the machine back to the point before we ever came here. Overwriting our steps. But if I do it, if I anchor myself inside the loop, I may not come out." The manual's final, redacted page had hinted at this. A self-sacrificial reset to collapse paradoxes, where one user becomes the temporal fulcrum, dissolving into the timeline to seal the changes. Liza shook her head violently, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked cheeks. "No, we go together. There has to be another way." "There isn't." His voice broke, but his hands were steady on the machine's controls. "The anchor can only fix one paradox. If both of us stay in the loop, it collapses. One of us has to be the sacrifice. And I can't let it be you." The sounds of the battle surged closer. Gunfire cracking, men screaming, the jungle alive with death. Alex pressed a trembling hand to her cheek. "You'll go home. You'll live. Tell our story, or bury it forever. But make sure it ends with you, not me." Liza clutched his hand, sobbing. "You're not a soldier, Alex. You're a historian. You don't have to die in someone else's war." He gave her a faint, broken smile. "Maybe that's all history ever is. Someone else's war. And maybe this time, I finally understand it." He turned back to the machine, the hum rising, blue light sparking like lightning as it powered up. Behind them, the jungle screamed with fury. Ahead of them, only the unknown waited. Liza wanted to pull him away, to stop him, but deep inside she knew. Alex had already made his choice, and the choice was blood, his own. The machine howled like a wounded animal, its blue arcs clawing at the night as Alex locked the controls. Liza clung to him, her fingers digging into his sleeve, but he gently pulled free. "Go," he whispered, his face lit ghostly in the glow. "Live for both of us." The air thickened, the jungle dissolving into streaks of light and sound. Liza screamed his name as the world tore open, but when the haze cleared, she was alone. The basement walls of the Institute closed in around her, the machine sputtering and then falling silent, its brass plate glowing faintly before dimming for good. Alex was gone. For a moment, silence pressed in, broken only by Liza's ragged breaths. She staggered to her knees, clutching the cold concrete. "Alex!" Her voice echoed in the empty room, met with nothing but the hum of dying circuits. The weight of it hit her then. He hadn't come through. He had chosen to anchor himself in the past, to erase the damage by sacrificing everything. The loop had worked. The dystopian future vanished, replaced by the familiar world, but at the cost of stranding Alex in 1965, woven into the fabric of history as if he had always been there. Days later, back in her apartment, Liza found herself unable to sleep. The modern world ticked on as if nothing had happened. The skyline was unchanged, the streets free of patrols, the newspapers free of war drums. The future had been restored. But the absence of Alex haunted every corner of her life. One evening, she opened an old history textbook, desperate for some trace of him. Flipping through the yellowed pages, her eyes caught on a black and white photograph she had seen before, but now it carved into her heart. A group of weary American soldiers stood in the Vietnamese jungle, mud-caked and unsmiling. And there, in the background, was Alex. No name in the caption, just unidentified soldier, 1965. In the reset timeline, he had lived out his days as a ghost in the war, perhaps dying in an ambush or surviving to return broken. His existence a quiet echo that ensured the original history unfolded without their interference. Her hand trembled on the page. Tears blurred the print, but she didn't look away. Alex had become what he always studied, history itself. A man swallowed by the war he tried to change, remembered not by name but by a frozen image, a silent witness to a tragedy he could never escape. Liza closed the book softly, her breath shuddering. Outside her window, the city pulsed with life. Cars honking, people laughing, the world moving forward, blind to the sacrifice that had kept it intact. She pressed the book to her chest and whispered, "I remember you. That's enough. It has to be." But in her heart, she knew it would never be enough. The machine was gone, the story complete, and history had corrected itself. Yet somewhere, in the thick jungles of Vietnam, Alex's footsteps remained, buried under mud, under blood, under time itself. And Liza carried the unbearable truth. The historian who longed only to witness had become the soldier who never returned. The man who wanted to rewrite history had instead been written into it, forever lost on a battlefield where he did not belong.